Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running. Commit. Liftoff.
We choose to go to the moon.
It was an obsession, absolutely. We finally have to beat the Russians at something.
We're sitting in the living room. Dad's walking on the moon in front of 300 million people.
Being able to look out and down at the Earth is incredible.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things.
But people could not live out here. It just wasn't safe. If something went wrong and blew up, they had to get people away.
It's kind of like an education just to realize what's happened in our backyard.
A1A was the lifeline of the Cape back then.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Space and the missile program has built this whole area here.
The Cape is always going to be the Cape. And to get there, we travel on A1A.
I have pictures of the building of the launch complex.
John Hilliard's amassed a collection, binders bursting with memories as he catalogs every one of the launches from Cape Canaveral. He says close to 8,000.
I find out a lot of people don't know much about the space program, and they have a false impression. 98% of the rockets came from Cape Canaveral, not Kennedy Space Center.
But it used to be like this. Yes. Captivated by Cocoa Beach ever since his father came home and announced they'd be moving to Patrick Air Force Base.
I said, "Where's Cocoa Beach?" He said, "In Florida." I said, "What do they do down there?" He said, "They launch missiles and rockets." And I said, "What is a missile?"
Now a volunteer for the 45th Space Wing, Hilliard gives tours of where it all started, where missiles at the base later developed into launch vehicles for space exploration. Between the Banana River and the Atlantic, A1A runs along coastal Brevard County. We're focusing on the stretch that runs between the base and the Space Center. It used to be a quiet road that moved past sleepy towns of Titusville and Cocoa. Until Russian ingenuity led to a launch. Sputnik, 1957.
It frightened Americans, because every 90 minutes a Russian satellite passed overhead.
Ushering in a new era.
The so-called space race. Us versus the Russians. And in this race, if you come in second, you don't get a silver medal. And then the world rushed in. It was almost like a gold rush. And there were housing shortages. There were stories of people living in their cars. Engineers, scientists, technicians would flock to this part of Central Florida. And they discovered that there wasn't very much here.
The government needed land, so in the late 50s, with the newly formed NASA providing promise, they exercised what's known as eminent domain. That's where the government forcibly acquires, with payment, private land for public use.
88,000 acres of land on Merritt Island, just west of the already established Cape, was the logical choice.
So you're talking about dislodging someone's family history. There are cemeteries out here. People have been out here for decades.
I'm imagining not everybody went willingly.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, in fact, most people didn't.
By the 1960s, the space was transformed into a refuge of about 40,000 acres. Small communities of Clifton, Shiloh, and Allenhurst off A1A all became collateral damage. Now just a few foundations remain.
What we're looking at here are actually steps that would come down probably from a second floor into what was, again, the hunting lodge, or that original big building that was the center part of Allenhurst.
Remnants of homesteads like planted orange and papaya trees old railroad tracks, all clues to the past. A buffer zone for the space program and a collective goal.
They're going to the moon, so everything was driving to the moon.
Everybody, whether you're an astronaut down to the people who swept up the vehicle assembly building at night, felt that they were part of this.
This allowed me to be in the firing room for the launch of the console.
Engineers like Jim Ogle,
History was made right here.
now a volunteer guide at Kennedy Space Center, dug in.
We tested and tested and tested every single system on that, every transistor, every wire, and there were millions of them, to perfection, to where we thought it's absolutely flawless.
As the government pumped money into NASA, 4% of the federal budget in 1966. Then came the moment that changed everything.
Ignition sequence start.
Andrew Aldrin, then 11 years old, watched with vested interest as his father, Buzz, made history. The time was 1969, the mission, Apollo 11.
And he's bouncing around on the moon, and I'm convinced he's going to trip over this cable and fall flat on his face in front of 300 million people, but mostly in front of my classmates.
Roger, Buzz, and break, Columbia. This is Houston. When you track out of high gain antenna limits, request Omni Delta over.
The only time there were cheers, for me personally, was when they lifted off of the moon, because that was the one element of the mission that really frightened me.
Astronauts returned victorious, rolled down the now bustling A1A in their Corvettes.
6 of the 7 Mercury astronauts drove Corvettes. John Glenn did not. The family man, he drove a very sensible station wagon.
Rock stars in America's eyes, the astronauts now needed a place to eat.
This is Eddie, and that's Bernard, who started Bernard Surf.
Rhett Fisher's family ran the famous astronaut hangout.
Our motto was, "From our fishing fleet to you."
His newer restaurant, Rusty's at the port, is lined with memorabilia. Photos launching diners back in time to the family's former restaurant along A1A, affectionately dubbed the Surf.
I was just a little kid, and I'd walk into the restaurant, and it was like a big family. It was the place to go in Cocoa Beach. Cronkite would be there, the astronauts from the Soyuz missions back in Russia, the Apollo astronauts.
The good times. But like everything in life, they don't last.
And as you talk to us from the Sea of Tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to Earth. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this Earth are truly one.
2 weeks after the first man set foot on the moon, Jim Ogle says it began.
I see somebody get a pink slip. Guy over here on the other side gets a pink slip.
What do you mean?
Layoffs. The layoffs started 2 to 3 weeks after the first moon landing.
Because we did it.
We've been there and done that.
We've been racing to the moon. We got there. We beat the Russians. Now what? There was not a clear answer to that question.
Taylor says as the government quietly began pulling funding, American interest in the space program waned. Unemployment soared, and the area built on the promise of space fell into decline.
A1A for all got to be very quiet again. There weren't Corvettes, there weren't throngs of tourists.
The trying times punctuated with peaks like the shuttle program in the 1980s. A decade later, Navy Captain Winston Scott joined the ranks, logging nearly 25 days in space.
You know, you're just awestruck about being there because you're one of the few people in the history of human race that have actually left the planet and lived and worked in space.
We're looking forward to today's events, including the spacewalk by Winston into Cal.
As you orbit the Earth, everything is just so awesome, so amazing, so beautiful, bright and colorful.
Life along the coast, along A1A, was stellar again.
In my day, we didn't get Corvettes, but we got convertibles. So we land our jets, jump in the convertible, and we drive up A1A. Energy along A1A ebbed and flowed with the energy level of the space program.
There were folks who said at the time, America's back, the space program is back, though it would never be the same as it was in the 60s.
Hope and excitement was especially high around the launch of the Challenger shuttle because Krista McAuliffe, a teacher and the first civilian selected to go into space, was on board. Spectators gathered to watch the launch on the cold morning of January 28, 1986.
Space Shuttle Challenger is just a few seconds away from blasting off from the Kennedy Space Center near Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye.
Almost 2 decades later, tragedy struck again.
This appears to be a catastrophic system failure on the shuttle itself.
There were 7 astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia when it lost contact with NASA.
The crew of the Shuttle Columbia did not return safely to Earth, yet we can pray that all are safely home.
After the Columbia disaster, the government suspended shuttle flights for 2 years before halting the program altogether in 2011.
When the shuttle dropped off, people didn't have jobs, so they were looking for, there was a lot of empty houses.
And it was just like a void. No one really talked about it. It just kind of happened.
Oh, how are you?
Good. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Don.
As Rusty's at the port powered through the economic downturn, the family sold their other A1A icon, Bernard Cerf, in 2006. It's reduced to dust in recent years. But just when the stars and the moon felt further away than ever before,
and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft,
the boom was back, as private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin began fueling a comeback for A1A and the space industry.
This renaissance of commercial space flight really is that next phase of innovation. It allows Kennedy Space Center to really be that epicenter of human space flight and space travel. And so we are that gateway right now to the moon and Mars and beyond.
I spend at least 20 hours a week in the lab. I'm hoping that in the end, I'm able to put plants on Mars.
What is the goal for NASA right now? What's the overall overarching?
So the near-term goal for us is the moon by 2024, first woman, next man on the moon, which is exciting.
There's always a need for women in space. We have moved a long way from when we couldn't even be able to vote to now we're actually having the ability to go into space, do engineering, do astrobiology.
Lofty goals, and in the meantime, launch after launch.
The best 2 minutes in sports are the launches, not the Kentucky Derby. That's what I say.
Re-energizing Rusty's at the port.
Customers come in, there's a complete energy shift when there's a launch. People who've never seen one before, the look on their face.
Hilliard, meanwhile, has no plans to publish his meticulous years of work, compiling launches off A1A.
What's going to become of these books?
I hope they'll go to the museum at the Cape where they can actually, people come in and do research.
So this could be a legacy?
Could be.
He just wants to make sure the past is not forgotten, as the program forges a new path, one not yet traversed, to the future.
I see a lot of opportunity. I love the fact that space is coming back. It gives us the ability to look forward to the future again.
And there's a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm and real capital being invested in space by the commercial sector.
It's hard to describe how exciting it is right now and where we think we can go. It's almost boundless.
This area is always going to be at the center of American space efforts.
Kennedy Space Center would not be here in the way that it is without A1A having been there to help supply the people, house the people, have restaurants, supermarkets, things like that.
A1A ran right to the Space Center, right to the launch pad to the stars.